First time I pulled up to this place, the mailman actually stopped his truck to warn me. Said the roof caved in back in 2019 and the town had a demolition order sitting in a drawer somewhere. Every neighbor I talked to said the same 3 words, tear it down. It was the worst house on the street, no argument there. Front porch sagging like a tired mule. Windows boarded with plywood gone gray, and the smell when I stepped inside, that wet paper smell of a house that's been breathing rain for 5 years straight. There was a family of raccoons living in the back bedroom, and I don't hold that against them. They had better sense than the last landlord. But I stood in that front room, and I looked up at the framing where the ceiling had let go, and I saw hand-cut joists, real ones. You can tell the hand-cut work from the marks. There's a little chatter in the wood where the axe and the adze went, a rhythm to it. And machine lumber doesn't have that. Somebody built this right the first time. So I bought her for $41,000, and I told the seller I'd have a family living in her again inside 7 months. Everyone said, tear it down. I'm going to show you why they were wrong. Let me tell you about her before we cut into anything. She's an 1898 farmhouse, vernacular Vermont style, what folks around here call a gable front and wing, the kind of house a dairy family built with their own hands and whatever the local mill was sawing that year. I found the build date scratched into a floor joist in the cellar, 1898, and a set of initials, EH. I never did find out who EH was, but I worked around his marks for 7 months, so I figure we're acquainted. She stayed in one family till about 1971, 3 generations under one roof. Then she got sold, chopped into a 2-unit rental, and that's usually where these houses start dying, landlord math. You spend the least you can and you collect the most you can, and 30 years of that adds up to a house nobody loves. Somebody drops a suspended ceiling to hide a water stain instead of fixing the leak. Somebody paints over rot instead of cutting it out. The last tenant left in 2018. The roof gave up the winter after, and she just sat there soaking. 5 years. That's a long time for a house to be alone. So the first real day, we started opening her up, and here's the thing about demolition on a house this old. You don't swing wild, you peel. Because you don't know what you're saving until you've uncovered it. And if you go in with a sledge, you'll wreck the good stuff to get at the bad. We pulled the plywood off the windows first, got some light in there, and that alone changed everything. A dark house always looks worse than it is. Then we started on the interior, and the plaster came off in wet slabs, heavy as gravestones, and behind it, I got my first look at the truth of her. The truth was mixed, I'll be straight with you. The whole northeast corner where the roof had failed, that framing was gone, not damaged. Gone. Rot had turned oak into something you could push your thumb through. I'd guess we lost about a third of the second floor structure over there. That's a real number, and it hurt to see it. You could smell that corner from across the room, that sweet, sick smell of wood. That's given up, but then you move 10 feet west out from under where the water came in, and it's a different house. The main carrying beam, the one that runs the length of her, is a single timber of old-growth hemlock. 26 feet, no splice, and when I put a moisture meter on it, it read 11%, dry as a bone, like it was milled last spring. That beam had been holding up this house for 125 years, and it was ready for 125 more. You go to a lumberyard today and try to buy a clear 26-foot hemlock stick, they'll laugh at you. That tree, Valley, was old when the Civil War started. The wiring was a museum and not the good kind. Knob and tube from the 20s, that's the ceramic knobs and the cloth-wrapped wire strung through the framing. Then somebody stapled 1960s cloth jacket wire right over the top of it. Then the landlord ran a few extension cords through the wall like that's a permanent solution. Found one splice held together with electrical tape and a prayer sitting right up against dry framing. That's not a repair. That's a house fire waiting for a cold night. All of it had to come out. Every foot. Under 3 layers of vinyl flooring in the kitchen, I found the original wide plank pine, 11 inches wide, some of those boards. You cannot buy that today. You can't. A tree that makes an 11-inch clear pine board doesn't get planted in a hurry, and nobody's got the patience anymore. I marked those floors to save before we did another thing. Laid a sheet of plywood over them so my own crew wouldn't chew them up with boot traffic. And here's the part I want you to sit with. Down in that cellar, cut into EH's joist, was a mortise and tenon joint so tight I couldn't get a knife blade in the seam. No nail, no glue, just 2 pieces of wood cut to fit each other exactly and locked with a wooden peg. Draw board, too, meaning he offset the peg hole a hair, so driving, the peg pulled the joint tighter over time, not looser. That's a trick a man learns from another man. Nobody figures that out alone. That joint had outlasted the roof, the wiring, 3 families, and 5 years of neglect. Somebody built this right the first time. My job is to not be the guy who ruins it. So we hauled out 14 dumpsters of the dead stuff, sorting as we went, pulling any old lumber sound enough to reuse into a pile out back. And then it was time to fix the bones. The structure came in 2 problems, the rotted corner and the fact that the whole house had settled toward the southeast about 3.5 inches over her lifetime. That's not unusual for a house this age on a rubble foundation. Houses walk. They lean toward wherever the ground's been softest, and you can read a house's whole history and how she leans. The corner was straightforward carpentry, just a lot of it. First thing, I shored everything around it with temporary posts so nothing moved while I worked. Then I cut back the rot till I hit wood that rang solid when I tapped it because you never leave a soft edge. Rot travels. I sistered new engineered lumber against the old sound framing, bolted through, and where the joists were gone entirely, I cut new ones. Now here's the decision I want to explain. I could have replaced those with modern dimensional lumber. Easy, cheap, but the old joists were true 2x8s, actual full 2 inches, and modern lumber is a 1/2 inch shy on both dimensions. Mixing them means an uneven floor forever, a little ridge or a dip you feel through your socks every day of your life. So I had them milled to the old dimension out of rough sawn stock. Cost me about $800 more, worth every dollar, because the floor upstairs is dead flat now and nobody will ever know why. The leveling, that's the slow part. You don't just crank a house back into place. You do it a quarter turn at a time over days with steel screw jacks and cribbing, oak blocking stacked like a log cabin under the beam, and you listen. An old house tells you when you're pushing too hard. She creaks, she pops, and if you get greedy, you'll crack every bit of plaster you just saved in split trim that's older than your grandfather. We brought her back about 2.5 inches over the better part of a week. Not all 3.5. Because at some point, forcing a house to be something she's not just makes new problems. 2.5 was honest. She wanted to keep a little of her lean, and I let her. Now I'll own a mistake here because I make them, and I'd rather you see them than pretend I don't. When I poured the new footings for that corner, I set one of them 1.5 inches off my own line. Didn't catch it till the beam wouldn't sit right, and I was standing there scratching my head, wondering why the geometry was fighting me. That one's on me. Cost me a day in a bag of concrete to bust it out and re-pour, and it taught me to check my layout twice on a Monday morning because apparently I can't be trusted with a tape measure before coffee. The foundation itself, the old rubble stone, we kept. It's field stone, laid dry and pointed with lime mortar, and it had done its job for over a century. Repointed it with a lime mix, not modern Portland cement because Portland's too hard and it'll crack the stone as the wall moves. Added a proper poured footing under the failed corner, sealed her up, ran a drain to keep water moving away. That saved me somewhere north of $38,000 versus a full foundation replacement, digging out and pouring new all the way around. And the stone's beautiful. Why would I throw away beautiful? With the bone sound, we went to the guts. And this is the stuff you never see once she's done, but it's the stuff that decides whether a family's warm in January or not. All new electrical, a 200 amp service where she used to have 60. 60 amps ran a farmhouse in 1955. It doesn't run a family with a dishwasher, a dryer, 2 space heaters, and every phone in the house on a charger. Every circuit new, grounded, home run back to the panel, done right, because I've seen what those stapled together fixes do, and I've stood in the burned out kitchen at the end of it. Not on my watch. Plumbing, all new PEX with a proper manifold. That manifold's like a breaker panel for water, 1 shutoff per fixture. So if a line ever gives you a problem, you can shut off 1 faucet instead of the whole house. Little thing. Matters at 2 in the morning when you've got a leak and a sleeping baby, and you don't want to go feeling around a dark cellar for the main. Ran the supply lines up through interior walls, not exterior, so they can't freeze on the coldest nights. But the real fight this phase was insulation, and it was a fight because winter came early. We're in Vermont. By the middle of November, it was dropping into the teens at night, and I had a house with the walls open. There's a window every year where you're racing the cold to get her sealed, and I lost the easy part of that window, fooling with the framing longer than I meant to. That's the thing about old houses. They'll take more time than you budgeted every time. and you learn to stop being surprised by it. So we went dense pack cellulose in the old wall cavities, blown in, tight enough that it won't settle and leave a cold gap at the top of the wall in 10 years. And closed cell spray foam in the new corner and along the roof deck, where I wanted a hard air seal and some structural stiffness both. I'll tell you my thinking. An old house wants to breathe a little. Seal her up airtight like a new build, and you can trap moisture in 100-year-old wood, and then you've just invented the same rot problem you spent all summer fixing. So I insulated her warm, but I let her breathe where she needed to, kept a vent path up under that roof so the sheathing can dry. That balance is the whole game in these old houses, and there's no shortcut for knowing it. You learn it by getting it wrong on somebody's house 20 years ago. And never forgetting, we got her buttoned up the first week of December. First night, the furnace ran. I sat in that empty shell with a thermos of coffee and watched the thermometer hold 68 while it was 9 degrees outside. Walls quiet. No draft moving. That's a good feeling. That's the house saying thank you. Then came the part where she gets her face back. Those wide pine floors we saved, we pulled every board, numbered them on the back with a lumber crayon so they'd go back in the same order they came out, cleaned the backs and relaid them over a new subfloor. About a fifth were too far gone, cupped or punky at the ends, so I sourced reclaimed pine of the same era from a barn that came down 2 towns over. Once they were sanded and finished with a hard wax oil, not poly because poly sits on top like plastic and oil sinks in and lets the wood look like wood, you truly cannot tell old from older. That floor is the soul of the downstairs. It's got dents from a family that lived here before the Titanic sank, and I left every one of them. You sand those out, you're sanding out the story. The kitchen is where the modern family part comes in because a family in 2024 doesn't want to cook in 1898, so it's an open plan now. We took out one wall between the old kitchen and the back parlor. Before I touched it, I checked it 3 ways to be sure it wasn't carrying load. It was a later partition, so out it came. And it's bright, it's got the island, the whole thing. But I framed the cabinetry around the room, not the other way around, so the old window trim and the tall ceilings still run the show. Kept the original casings, scribed the counters to meet them. Modern, where you touch it. Old, where you look. And now the piece I've been waiting to tell you about. When we opened up that back parlor wall behind the cheap paneling the landlord slapped on in the 70s, there was a fireplace. A brick firebox with a mantle, hand-built, painted over about 9 times, but underneath solid. The bricks were laid by somebody who cared. I could see it in the joints, tight and even, the same care as that mortise down in the cellar. Probably the same hands. I'd bet. Everyone who saw it said, cover it back up, it's a mess, it's not worth the trouble. I spent 3 days just stripping that mantle by hand. Chemical stripper, let it sit, scrape again. Dental picks to get the paint out of the bead detail, patience, and a lot of it. And underneath the 9 coats was tiger maple. Figured maple, the grain running in those tiger stripes that catch the light and seem to move when you walk past. On a farmhouse, that's a fancy wood. Somebody put their best wood on that mantle because it was the heart of the house and they knew it, and then somebody else buried it under 9 coats of paint and a sheet of paneling because they were in a hurry. I rebuilt the firebox, replaced the cracked bricks with reclaimed ones so the color matched, relined the flue so it's safe to burn, and that mantle now sits at the center of the family room, restored, oiled, glowing. It cost me about $2,200 in labor and materials to save something 2 demolition crews would have thrown in a dumpster. It's the first thing you see when you walk in the door. So let me walk you through her finished. You come up the new porch, rebuilt on the old footprint with a proper roof this time, and posts that actually carry the load, and in through the front door. And right there, the pine floors stretch out ahead of you, warm and honey-colored, running toward the light. To your right, the family room, and that tiger maple mantle over a working fireplace, the heart of her beating again. Straight back, the whole house opens up into the kitchen. White up top, warm wood below, that island in the middle, and the tall old windows pouring light across a floor that's older than every appliance in the room by a century. Upstairs, 3 bedrooms, all of them flat and true and warm, and a bathroom where the plumbing works and the fan actually vents outside like it's supposed to instead of into the attic where the last one dumped its moisture for 20 years. Here's the accounting, because I always give it to you straight. I paid $41,000 for her. I put in right around $148,000. 7 months, near enough to the day I promised. Comparable renovated homes on that street run $260,000 to $280,000. But that's not really the number that matters to me. The number that matters is that the town had a demolition order in a drawer, and now there's a family moving in next month. 2 kids. The mother told me she cried when she saw the mantle. That's the number. Somebody built this house right the first time back in 1898, and every wrong thing that happened to her after was somebody in a hurry, somebody doing the landlord math. And all it took to bring her back was to stop being in a hurry, to peel instead of swing, to save the beam and the floor and the mantle, because the man who made them knew something worth keeping. We don't build like EH anymore, but we can still refuse to be the one who throws his work away. Next one's already got me nervous, and I'll be honest with you about that. It's a stone mill house down by the river, 1840s, and half of it standing in the water. Foundation's fine, believe it or not. They knew how to build on a river back then. But there's a water wheel mechanism buried in the back wall that somebody bricked over 100 years ago, and I want to know what's back there before I decide what she's going to be. Come find out with me. What?